everyone, Joe March here, also known as Psycho Sorcerer, and Veritus Tiamat was real? Is that what I'm naming this video? Veritus Tiamat was right? Maybe that's what I'm naming it. I don't know, but that's what this video is about. So let's start with a recap of what's been going on. I feel like I've been recapping a lot with these latest videos, but that's because I post so infrequently lately. 10 months ago, I posted a video about a Halloween ritual I did in which I spoke to the various deities I've worked with throughout the years and received a revelation that they are all the same being. In short, they are my personal version of the all interacting with me using the faces of the mythological gods. While this is something I've suspected for a long time and even something that I was told outright by Tiamat, it was still a very big experience for me to have this laid out to me during that ritual where I was reaching out to each one of these entities in the same methods I had used to reach out to them one by one by one. And yes, for some of those, that's sigil magic. For some of those, that's just opening up. I literally did it the way I had done it throughout the years. And for those that you just can't summon, so to speak, I just opened up to them and let them arrive, which they did in order to express this to me. So I got this certainty that I didn't have before at that time that this is true, that all of the different entities that I've worked with are, in fact, the same entity, and that entity is me, but not in a psychological sense necessarily. That is this sort of higher self getting impressed upon by these external energies, so to speak, and the personal connection that I have with the gods, and in fact, the personal connection that everybody has with their gods is actually a personal connection with their own higher self. That's basically what that video is about. That's basically what I came to understand then. But ever since then, I've been going through a transformation because I've been spending time analyzing that and in my own spiritual meditations and practices, diving deeper into that. And that's led to everything else that you guys have seen recently. So one thing that led to was 8 months ago, I put out a video called Is the Eternity God? From my point of view, calling it God invites misunderstanding. The all is the eternity. It's everything that is. It's everything that ever will be. It's everything that was. The all is, so to speak. It's not an individual, and I think whenever you call it God, you're putting that individuality onto it. In actuality, it's not an it. And I think I've explained this many, many times in the past few videos. I don't want to repeat myself too much. But by virtue of you interacting with it, you end up creating a personal connection, which you interpret as separate, but which is actually your higher self. And this, again, is kind of the same thing we were talking about in the previous video, but it's delved into more there. In basically a means of explaining why I don't think that makes the all God. So 5 months ago, I added to this by going into depth on what the gods actually are. They are the faces of the all, representations of the forces that make up the all. They're all personified so you can understand them. When we interact with them, we are letting our higher self take on the appearance and energies of those forces to speak to it, and thus we end up taking on aspects of those forces ourselves. And that's what that video is about. And then 13 days ago, I added my latest video, which is called How Have You Been?, where I recapped what it's been like over the past year entirely, and I spoke about the fact that I've experienced a greater integration between the two forces of order and chaos now, balancing out my previous predilection toward chaos over order. So why all this recap right now? Why am I bringing all this up? Because all of these videos, while they were well thought out, and while they went through the experiences I had as I'd undergone really living through the spiritual change, this was all outlined already in my Veritus Tiamat videos. I went back and listened to the 3-part series Veritus Tiamat, which is from over a year ago, so it's before all these other videos came out. And everything we just discussed is in those videos already. Now, what was Veritus Tiamat? These are videos of me sharing an experiment where I wrote down everything that poured out of my mind during trance and journey so that I could create what I was calling a Bible of Tiamat, like what if Tiamat was to speak to me and tell me what everything is about in such a form that I would put it into a book to be able to share with others. And that's what Veritus Tiamat was. But I purposely didn't edit it. I purposely didn't change it. I just made it what I quote unquote channeled through that connection and then read it on the channel. So it was in 3 different videos. It was a reading of what that was. And I honestly didn't take it all that seriously, even though it was an experiment that was very interesting. But now I'm taking it a little more seriously. So I listened to all of it again just last night and today, and I can see that everything that's been going through the past year has actually been me coming to understand what was in Veritus Tiamat. So I read Veritus Tiamat and I thought, man, this sounds a little too new agey. This sounds a little too much like I'm just accepting the metaphor at face value. And I still read it off, but I felt that way at the time. I was like, I feel like this needs vetted more. But now, a year later, coming back to it, I listened to it and I was like, holy shit, this is just 100% right based on what my experiences have been this year. So that's wild. Now, I hear some of you saying there was a 4th video in the Veritus Tiamat series where I talk about my own self and how that relates. Throw that video in the trash. That video can at most be summed up by the reason that I was attracted to speak to Tiamat as opposed to other gods is because of my already existing personality. That's all that one really says. And that one was not something channeled or written. That was just me analyzing Veritus Tiamat and getting a lot of it wrong. It's clear to me now that the all is not just a psychological construct, as I was kind of leaning toward in that video. It's actually everything, and we are it. The higher self is the real us, connected to the all and able to bridge the gap between self and whole. And working to unite that within the self is both psychological and spiritual in nature. I believe I've made great strides in this now, and this is what was being hinted toward in the writings of Veritus Tiamat in the first place. Basically, as I re-listened to all of this, I realized that 1 year ago me was ahead of current me, somehow. And I mean, I guess that's what it is whenever you open up to the higher self and just pour it out onto the page. You get some real fucking wisdom, but then you don't see it for what it is until you experience it yourself. So listening to this again and looking at everything that I've been posting, I'm like, holy shit, I'm just posting the same thing that I said in that video, except through the experience lens. Because I'm experiencing that. And I feel like I had to. I feel like I was reading it and I was like, oh, this is how it is, huh? And now I'm like, yeah, it is. But I had to go through it. I think this is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it shows that the higher self already knew what the fuck was coming. And 2, it shows that just because a person can articulate an idea and really pour that creative juice out onto the page that speaks to you, doesn't mean they get what they wrote. They might get it later, like I'm having happen now, or they might never get it. Sometimes the muse speaks, and it's not even the writer who listens to it. So one interesting thing from Veritus Tiamat that stood out to me upon re-listening to it was when discussing the Chaos Kampf, the story of the dragon versus the sky god, Tiamat says this: the true story is the ongoing battle between the part of us that wants peace and the part of us that wants change. Both have good intention, but can grow to hate each other if not kept in balance. I feel like part of what I've been experiencing most recently is exactly this, is understanding this. You can see that in this clip from my last video. Further changes recently, I've accepted that order stabilizing opposite to Tiamat, which is that chaos transformative aspect, and I've started to integrate that into the self as well, sort of like when I talked about the merging of Tiamat. Now there is a merging of this other force. I've got my own naming convention for what that is, but I'm not getting into any of that. I will let you know more as it progresses what that means, but there has been this combining of those forces now. So as much as I love me, the chaotic transformative force, it is now being blended with that stabilizing ordering force. I even had an experience in my mind during one of my dramatic meditations where I felt as if I was resurrecting Apsu, which is the lover of Tiamat, and allowing them to dance together again, allowing the ordered aspect to once again get with the chaotic aspect in a way where they were both healthy and together instead of in an adversarial way. And that has been that marked that change period where I started to see this change within myself as well. So what I'm experiencing there is a reuniting of healthy order and healthy chaos in harmony with each other. A friend of mine, Solomon, talks about the magic of the Maya, and we've discussed the gods of the Maya before. In that culture, there were gods of order who were considered good, and there were gods of chaos who were also considered good. But there were also these beings that they fought against. These so-called evil beings were order and chaos taken to far extremes. They were tyranny and destruction, basically. I think this is important to recognize, that chaos isn't destruction and order isn't tyranny, but that to extremes they become this, that you need to find the balanced point where the two, chaos and order, can dance together, like Apsu and Tiamat, as opposed to them being head-to-head, like Marduk and Tiamat. Because when they're head-to-head, they clash and they create disorder. But when they work together, it's actually for a greater good. Too much order leads to tyranny. Too much chaos leads to destruction. Balance is needed to find harmony in the self. But most people today think living in an orderly way is bringing about balance. They think keeping strict routines and following rules and traditions are what keep you balanced. This is all order, no chaos. True balance involves the chaos of letting spur-of-the-moment things take you away, spending time being creative, inviting yourself to see others' points of view. It requires you to keep some routines and leave time for the unpredictable. It requires that you be honest with yourself, forgiving to others, and adapt to new experiences. Without chaos, we don't grow. For a long time, however, I've overcompensated with chaos, which can lead to rejecting routine entirely, thumbing your nose at rules, and ignoring tradition. This is a recipe for inviting unnecessary difficulty into your life. So true balance involves the ordered approach of learning from the discoveries of those that came before you, prioritizing routines that will keep you stable and healthy, and being responsible for those you care about and for what you wish to protect. In other words, reject tyranny, reject anarchy, but find a balanced dance of order and chaos instead of a warring clash between them. And that's what I am finding now through this process that I'm going through. I believe there's also been a letting go of Tiamat as the singular force that I work with to connect with the all, and a reconnection with the all as a whole that's going on as well. In what I had talked about in my last video, I spoke about how in the visions that I had, I saw Apsu and Tiamat dancing together once again. They came together as a force of order and chaos that could be in harmony as opposed to opposed to one another. And as that happened, they lifted off away from me as if leaving me. And as they did, I felt the strife inside of me lifting away and gone as well. It's as if I'm changing into something that is now involved in the dance instead of involved in the struggle. And speaking of dance, I feel as if now my practice is to dance directly with the all, to trust in the higher self that I am, as opposed to needing to call upon gods, and to just interact with reality as it is, and to see what happens there. That's what I'm moving toward at this point. Now, does that mean I can't call upon gods in the future? Of course not. I'll continue to work with these forces as they do help you to come to understand the all more clearly. However, I now recognize what dance I'm doing with them or with the all when that happens. For each god I call up and allow to impart aspects of themselves upon me, I'm inviting its opposite to stand opposed to me. I'll remain opposed to that opposite until I'm able to rectify the differences between the two forces within myself and then bring them to balance. So, calling upon such forces should be done strategically because I'm going to end up in conflict until I can bring something to balance as soon as I start that process. So this process should be treated as a process that takes time and should be given the time that it needs. I know it sounds cliche, but this understanding is finally making me feel like a wizard, as they say, and by that I do mean by the roots of that word. I feel like the practice has moved me from someone who was dabbling into magic into someone who is a wise man. I see the world around me as it truly is, connected, flowing, transforming, unifying, and I see myself in the same way, and that is probably the most articulate way I can put what's going on with me right now. What's going on with you? I'd like to hear about that in the comments. And aside from that, I'll see you next time. Until then, safe travels.